Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the podcast. This week, I wanted to invite Susie on to talk about brand photography and why it's important. And we also got into a bit of branding stuff as well. So that was really, really exciting. That was really, really fun. And yeah, hope you're well. Hope you're having a good week. And this week, it's going to be really, really exciting because we've got some other content going live later on this week. But hope you enjoy this conversation. And I'll leave Susie's links in the description down below. And I'll see you very, very soon.
Hi, I'm Susie, and I am a brand photographer based in Salisbury, but I cover Hampshire, Wiltshire, Dorset, and Somerset. So I work with business owners, predominantly female, but not always. And I work we create a bespoke photo shoot for your business to create a portfolio of images for you to use in all of your marketing. So that can be for social media, for your website, for any printed marketing that you have, your business cards. And it's the best way to really get your face out there and show people the why behind your business. Obviously nowadays everyone's aware that people buy from people, so having your face out there and your identity as part of your business is really important. And having a really good visual identity as part of your business is again essential, because so many people are now shopping online that you need to stand out from the crowd and you need to look and feel professional when people visit your online websites or social media sites. So brand photography, is, to me, I love it. I love helping businesses. I love helping people to grow their business, and I love meeting new people and learning all about why they do what they do.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I mean, for me, brand photography is not necessarily something I've been aware of, but not necessarily something I haven't spoken to a brand photographer before, like before we met properly. So it was interesting to hear kind of your perspective. But for just the listeners' sake, what, like, outside of what you just said, like, why, what are the key things that makes brand photography different from, say, like portrait photography or product photography, or things that arguably could be used in a similar fashion? What kind of makes the brand photography side of it more, like, what makes that bit special, right? I think that's going to be the main question that people have when they think of like a brand photography person or brand photographer.
Yeah, so brand photography can encompass all of that. It's not defined by one genre. Your brand photography shoot can encompass anything that you want it to. But the difference is that it's not just a shoot where I will turn up and take pictures. It is a big, long planning process beforehand to really discuss your brand. So I get to know you really well and understand your business and what messages you're trying to get across and who you're trying to connect with. And we plan the shoot around that so that all the images that you get are sending a message out to your ideal clients and they are attracting them to your business. So as I say, you can include anything. If you have, if your ideal client's a parent, then you might want to include your children in your shoot, and that would be maybe some portrait photography. But if you have a product-based business, then maybe you want some product photography included in there, and we can do like a style product shoot, and then obviously some headshots, and it ties the whole thing together to tell a story of your business. So it gives people an understanding of like why you do it, and sort of tells a bit about you as well as a person, not just about this product or this is my service. It gives them a way into getting to know your personality as well.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, that's interesting for me because I think there's a lot of, similarities and differences. I mean, obviously one's still and one's moving, but like I see a lot of kind of the transitions between like how video could be utilized and how brand photography could be utilized to tell a story. I mean, I've got two questions there. I mean, firstly, like, how do you see, like, do you see them working together? Firstly, like from a video, and then also like then the brand photography side. Firstly, and then if you do, how would you personally, or whether that's for your brand or a client's brand, necessarily utilize them together?
I think you can absolutely use them together. And to be honest with you, any and all visual content is good. So, anything that's going to capture the attention of your clients is going to be good. And if it's done professionally, even better. I think using them together, the images. Actually, I had this conversation with one of my clients the other day because she was saying that she she was umming and ahhing over brand photography because she wasn't sure. I mean, her skill and her, what she's good at is being in front of the camera and talking to people and, communicating. And so she said, I'm perfectly happy going on a computer and doing lives and talking, but being in front of a camera, I hate it. I really don't like having my picture taken, and I'm not sure like what I do with all the images. Anyway, we talked it through, and she did decide to go ahead, and she's actually signed up to my year-long package now, so she has a shoot every 3 months. And we had her first shoot a few weeks ago, and she absolutely loved it. And she said, I never thought I'd say it, but I actually really loved being in front of the camera. I love the pictures, and it's massively improved my confidence as well. But not only that, I now have a way of, like, I really struggle to put across what I was trying to say in copy. I can do it in a video because obviously I can talk about it, but writing it in copy is really difficult. But then having these images now to put with the copy really gets across what I'm trying to say. So combining the two has really, really helped her. And she doesn't really like doing social media very much. I think she gets someone to plan it all for her, but she writes the copy and then she does the live videos, and she does all the communication really. And together it's really powerful, and she pops up on my newsfeed all the time. And every time, I mean, obviously partly because I take the pictures so I recognize them, but like they do really catch your eye as well. And I notice, especially like when I'm scrolling through Instagram or through Facebook, I'll stop the scroll when you can tell that the image is a personal, professional image. It interests, really catches my attention. And also, videos do it as well, and probably almost more than static images. If you see a clip of video and you're like, oh, that looks interesting, you're much more likely to stop and watch. So combined, if you can combine the tone of a brand photo shoot and video together and really kind of capture the brand essence in all of it together, it can be really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think that's true, but I also think it's one of those things where you need to be the right person for the client as well. Like, because part of, and I don't know if you agree here, but part of our job as videographers or brand photographers or etc. is to help the client feel comfortable with the process, right? With being on camera, with being in front of camera, whether that's for stills, whether that's for video, etc. Do you feel that? Well, I mean, firstly, I think the question there is: do you feel that is part of our job, our role? But also, then, what techniques would you give to, say, beginner photographers, beginner videographers, people who are just starting in on their journey, to help their client, help their customer, whoever their model is, feel more comfortable on camera? Because everyone's had those kind of like, oh, I don't want to be on camera. Oh God, no, I'm not doing this. No, this is terrible. I still get it now, but I think it's going to be interesting to hear from your side about those and some of the strategies which you use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, literally 90%, I reckon, of the people that I speak to say, I hate being in front of the camera, but I know that it's necessary for my business, so that's why I'm doing it. I'm not looking forward to it, but it's something that needs to be done. And then by the time it's finished, they're like, actually, yeah, it was really good fun. And people have said, I really, really enjoyed it. And it's a combination of really getting to know your client before the shoot. I think, you have to actually speak to them, you have to get to know them, you have to get to know them as a person, and you have to connect. As you say, like, a connection is quite important. If you don't connect with the person that you're working with, it can be quite difficult to draw out their personality. But I mean, one of my brand values is fun. Like, I want to have fun with what I'm doing. There's no point in doing something if it's not fun. So I generally try and have a laugh with my clients while I'm working with them. And I find it brings out, natural smiles much better if you're just messing around. And as I say to them, this is a digital era. We're working with digital cameras. If you make a stupid face, if you're blinking, if you do something stupid, it gets deleted. I take thousands of photos on a shoot and you only see a small proportion of them because, I just snap away. And at the end of the day, you get some really, really great images. And making people relaxed, talking to them. I literally talk all the way through a shoot. But also, it's what I do. I'm a photographer and I take photos of people, so I know how to get people to look their best, if that makes sense. So whether it's just posing, slightly changing an angle, getting them to face the light, leaning towards the camera, just things like that. Giving people direction can make them more comfortable because you give them the impression, obviously, that you know what you're talking about. So that makes them feel more comfortable, and it gives them something to think about other than like, oh, what do I do? Do I do this? Should I do that? Should I do that? If you actually give them a bit more direction, and it depends on who you're working with, because some people, don't need it. Some people are completely comfortable, and some people need a lot more. But it's kind of judging that when you're working with your client as to how much direction they need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No, absolutely.
really is massively important, so that you actually, by the time I meet up with my clients, I almost feel like they're more friends than they are clients, and we just have a laugh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really important to build that connection first. I mean, especially if you're going to be, doing an interview with someone, or filming them or taking photos of them working or whatever it may be. I think it's important to have that connection with them, so they firstly trust you, but then also it means they're not this kind of like, okay, cheese, they're like this kind of like age old, like, oh, okay, it was a stage photo. And some stage photos are necessary and they're good and they're painful to get sometimes. But I think it's one of those things where the majority of the best photos, personally, I've found that I have had of me, but also of that I've taken as well, have been in those moments, in those micro moments, in those, in that one moment where I was walking, I turned my head, whatever it was, that kind of shares my emotion, shares what I'm doing, shares the passion somehow. And it's hard for me to put into words how it does that. But I think for me, I think would also be interesting to explore would be like, because obviously we've done a shoot. One of the images will be used probably on this one, as well. But how was that experience for you in regards to like, well, like, firstly starting out with like how we started out with it, like, getting to know Brunton Media specifically, but then also on the shoot day, what did you have like preconceived ideas into it? Because obviously, as you said earlier in this conversation, you mostly work with females, right? And surprise to no one, I'm not a female. So I think for me, it would be interesting to hear kind of like how that process was for you. Like, firstly, what was that process? But also then, like, number two, like, how was that process me specifically?
Yeah. No, well, but firstly, one thing I wanted to say was, well, just listening to what you're saying there, a big difference between the brand photography shoots and a headshot is that headshots do tend to be those sit, pose, say cheese images, which say nothing about you. Whereas like a brand photo shoot, as you say, when you get these images where like it's part of your action, it's not just a frozen moment, it's part of like your movement, and it's it's part of who you are more, so it tells a lot more about you than just a kind of sit and say cheese moment. But yeah, no, the process, so working with you was different. I mean, I have worked with men before, so it's not like you're the first one. But there is a very different way of working. Obviously, men don't need quite so much direction, I guess. But there are also like angles and poses are very different for men than women. So, I mean, I do a lot of research before a shoot for everybody. I do a lot of, vision boarding and just looking up different ways that I can kind of portray your brand. So yeah, for me, it was a research point of view. I go on Pinterest, I look up, other examples of shoots that maybe some of my other colleagues have done. It's just getting inspiration, really. But from what we talked about beforehand, I had a really good idea of what you wanted from your shoot, because we'd had a long discussion beforehand about what you were looking for and what kind of messages you wanted to get across and what kind of images you wanted out of it. So we really talked through like the locations, using the cathedral was quite important. Getting some movement shots, the fact that you walk around a lot, that you use your phone, that you do your vlogs and things like that. So all of that was kind of tied in, and it was just like, how can I tie that in with the fact that you live and work in Salisbury and get some of your personality across. So yeah, it was just kind of pre-research, talking to you, getting to know your business, and yeah, a part of it is just instinct as well. It's just got to built knowledge and going with the flow. So
Yeah, no, so I think it's important to like understand specifically like because I think a misconception with photographers and videographers is, okay, cool, you're gonna show up, you're gonna take the photos, take the video, cool, fab, you're gonna cut it together, there you go, job done. In reality, that's what we do. Yes. In reality, that's like what you see, what you see us do, and what is the glamour part of our job. The reality is we spend huge amounts of time working out, thinking, planning, whether that's storyboarding, whether that's in our head, whether that's writing articles this long, or not, about why, about how, about, okay, well, why are we going to use this occasion? How are we going to use this occasion? What should you bring? What should you wear? Etc. Right? And all those things, and that's for me where brand is different to other forms of photography, because you take those elements, you take those values, you take those core elements, and you try to make the images, or do your best to make the images to relate to those brands, and for me, or to that brand. So for me, I mean, a lot of the things I do, and I was doing this last night, was when I'm actually given like a written brief, which is lovely, by the way. If clients are listening, please give me a written brief. Makes my life a lot easier. When I'm given a written brief, 3 stages through the edit, I will check, am I hitting those criteria, right? So I've been working with a client of mine to create a very short video that showcases her as a speaker, right? And there's, certain things she wants to hit on those and be like, okay, well, we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do this. So the video is like nearly on its first draft, and I was like, okay, I'm going to rewatch it twice, once with my eyes closed, once with my not with my eyes closed, and I'm going to check, does it hit those criteria, right? And does it actually do the job that I'm being hired to make or create? Do you find that there's, I guess, like misconceptions with brand photography, or it's it's easy, or it's easy money or whatever? Because a lot of, I don't know whether you've heard the same, but sometimes with videography it's like, yeah, but I can do this on my phone. It's so easy. It's creating videos easy. It's like, well, yes, it can be, but there's also there's very different levels to it. So have you? I guess the question there is, have you had people who, or whether they're clients or friends or family or just random people who have said, "Oh, brand photography is easy," and then if so, what would you say in response to that, to say, "Oh, well, it's actually not, and here's why"?
I'm not sure I've had people say that it's easy as such. It's more, it's expensive, which it is, because, as I say, it's a big investment in your time and my time, and what you get out of it is really valuable. I understand what people say in terms of, phones nowadays can actually capture some pretty good images, but the quality of an image that you'll get on your phone is never ever going to match what you get out of a professional camera, and an image that you take if you're not a professional photographer is never going to be what you'd get from a professional photographer. So you put the two together, you've got an amateur photographer with an amateur phone, or a professional photographer with a professional camera. I can take pretty good photos on my phone, but the quality of them is never going to be as good as it is on my camera. You just can't match it. My camera, my equipment is expensive, and it's expensive for a reason, because it will capture brilliant images, and you can blow them up to the size of a house and they'll still maintain their quality. Whereas a picture on a phone, you can't. I wouldn't even recommend using them on your website because they're not good enough quality. So yeah, in terms of it being easy, anybody can capture video, anybody can capture photos, but to put the time and the effort into planning, and then having the vision, as you say, it's a lot of planning that goes into it, not just in terms of like what photos you're going to get, but what you're going to wear, where you're going to go, what props you're going to use, what colors you're going to use, how you're going to make it all tie together, how you're going to keep the tone consistent. All of that goes into a planning stage, and then you have the photo shoot. So that's more time and effort that goes into that. And then there's the editing, which people don't see, and it can take hours and hours. The amount of time I sit in front of my computer is just unbelievable. And yeah, and then there's obviously like the post-processing, editing, pulling the photos from the computer onto the gallery, making them accessible. And then obviously, like, you're running a business in the background as well. So yeah, you can take photos yourself by all means. And again, with products as well, you can do, but they're never going to be as good as professional photos are. And with brand photography, the time that's invested in it is just as important as the actual photos at the end, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think it's, there's some clients who will understand that from the get-go, right? They're like, okay, I understand why, I get it. Others will take some more persuading and take some more understanding and take more of a conversation. But I think the follow-up question to that would be, like, what's next for you in your business then, right? Like, you're a brand photographer, sure, but like, obviously there's a kind of key argument to there to go, well, okay, well, who's going to take your brand photography, right? Who's going to take your shots? Because you can't take your own shots, really. Well, you can. It gets a bit complicated. Yeah, you can, but trust me, it's easier not to. Anyway, but yeah, and we've had conversations privately about like, oh yeah, I would love to create behind the scenes content of me creating films and being with clients and stuff, but it's hard to film that and focus onto it. Anyway, it can get very difficult to do both. So I think the question there is like, what are the next things you want to do? Say, I like giving the guests on the podcast a chance to kind of throw an idea or throw ideas into the future, because then they can watch this back in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, and see where their mindset was, see where their goals was, where, did you hit it? Did you surpass it? Did you change direction? So I think the question there is kind of what is next for your business? Where is, well, I mean, how old is it? 1, 2, like, how did you kind of get into it? But then also, then where is it next? If that makes sense, like those kind of catch-all, because I don't think we've discussed that as much. But I think that's interesting to hear, especially for people who, because I know some people who listen to the podcast are not necessarily looking for brand photography, but are looking to get into photography as a professional, right? So I think there could be a lot of value there. So kind of what is next? Let's start with that. What is next for your business?
Well, that's a very good question. It's probably easier to start at the beginning, actually.
Okay, fine, but fine. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get started in your business?
How did I get started in my business? Well, I've been doing photography now for probably around 6-7 years. But it started off more as a hobby. I went to college and did night school and studied. And then I had a full-time job still, so I was working at weekends doing eventing photography, so show jumping cross country. I built up my kits, got some experience, learned quite a lot about, actually it's a really good area of photography to learn from, because you have to be able to capture moving subjects in different lighting conditions, in pouring rain, and you do it all day long. So it's good experience, but I did that for a while. I also did some portrait shoots on the side, for friends, and then friends of friends, and things like that. And everyone was saying to me, "You should do it as, you should do it as your career. Why aren't you doing photography full time?" And at the time, it was just, I had a mortgage to pay, and I couldn't afford to give up my full time job to do it, and it was too scary. And anyway, then I had my kids, and after I had my second kid, I couldn't go back to my previous job because the time didn't work with childcare and things. And so it was either a case of go and look for another job that will fit around childcare and everything else, or take the leap and do my photography, which is what I wanted to do in, like, all along. And my family were really supportive and said, just do it, give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? So I did, and I've been doing photography as my business now for was September 2000, where are we? 18. Yeah, September 2018, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That no, sorry, September 2019. That I officially registered my business, and thought that I wanted to go into portrait photography. So I set it all up as a portrait business. And then in the January, I discovered brand photography. And if anybody is looking at doing brand photography, if you're interested in learning it, then my mentor is called Gillian Devine, and she's absolutely amazing. And she runs challenges quite often, like 5-day challenges on Facebook, and teach all there is basically to know about brand photography. And then she has a paid course that you can do following that, which basically teaches you everything you need to know about setting up your own business and how to run a successful photography business. So I did that. So it's a crash course basically. And yeah, came out of that all ready and raring to go, and then got locked down. So yeah, it was great fun. But actually, do you know what? It's been fine. Like, throughout lockdown, it wasn't easy, but it gave me a lot of time to really set up my marketing and get all of the important bits in place. And then when September came, September and October, I've just been run off my feet with brand photography. It's been amazing. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. But I still do portraits as well. So for me at the moment, what I'm trying to do is um, figure out how to run a brand photography and portrait photography business together and how I want them to go and figure that out. Um, but for the future, it's a really good question because at the moment my business is still quite young, so I'm just still aiming to get everything set up in terms of, my brand photography runs very smoothly now. I know what I'm doing, I know my packages, I know my processes. It's all changing, if I find something that works better, I change it. And there are always new things coming along. But for the future, I think some of it's going to have to go online. Everybody's going online at the moment, so I might start doing some online courses to help people out. And also, I want to put together a stock library of images for businesses because although I rant and rave about people using stock images, there is a place for them. I use them occasionally, but mostly on my social media. I would never recommend using stock images on your website because it says absolutely nothing about you. But as I say, there is a time and place for them. So having stock images that you can buy and then reuse and repurpose is always useful. So that's easy for me to create. But yeah, I think just getting my brand business and my portrait business up and running how I want them to go once we've figured out coronavirus and, hopefully when it's away a little bit and we can get back to some sort of normality, it's going to be just getting my name established a bit more and building it that way. But ask me again in the year, might have something different for you.
No, absolutely. I think it's interesting as I say, I think it's interesting to hear that now and then, I've done this, I've said in podcasts, and that's why I think content is valuable to talk about because it allows you to immortalize your mindset specifically, because, for example, where I wanted to go a year ago is not where I want to go now and will not be where I want to go in a year's time. So, and also where I am now is not where I expected to be in March, for example. I think March, I think a lot of people can relate to this, but March specifically when COVID hit was very difficult for me specifically, like March specifically. But I just made the point in the sand where I was like, okay, well, in April 1st, you're going to go back to work. No idea what I was going to do. No idea how I was going to do it, but I went back to work. And then from that point forward, it's been very, very interesting to see how I've been able to evolve Brunton Media to the point where there's no such thing as being lockdown proof, right? You can't be lockdown proof. You can have revenue streams and solutions and things that you can offer your clients that allows them to help scale through lockdown. It's always going to be harder during a lockdown, right? Period. It just is. Or whatever that means, right? But I think for me, it was important to develop those different revenue streams during April and for that. So, for me, I think the interesting question would be because you started literally 3 months before COVID hit, really, like with branding, but with brand properly, but with the whole business overall, probably about 7-8 months or so. How was it setting up a business through COVID? Because you don't. I guess the question there is because you won't necessarily have known what having a business without COVID is like. Do you think that's is going to allow you to be a better and stronger business owner in moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. It can't get much worse than this, can it? Well, I hope not. Anyway, I'm sure. But, yeah, it's been tough. Luckily, I'm in a position, my family is in a position where my husband can support us. So even during lockdown when I was bringing in no income, it wasn't a huge issue. Obviously other people are not necessarily that lucky. It can be really difficult and the worst came to the worst, I would have had to get a job, even stacking shelves at Tesco's or something. But I wasn't going to give up on it because it's what I want to do. And my husband said to me back in January before all this all started, he said, give yourself a year and see how it's going, and we'll go from there. And 3 months later, he was like, "Well, it's not really a fair comparison, is it?" So,
yeah.
But to be honest with you, I've had, as I say, lockdown was pretty crap. I didn't really bring in much money then, but I did book a load of shoots afterwards because people realized that they needed to come back stronger, and a lot of people actually benefited from lockdown. And online businesses, people who can work online and who were set up to work online already, did really, really well out of it. And those businesses are flourishing now, and they've got the ability to invest and want to grow. So by the time I came back, they were like, yep, let's do it. But also people realize that brand photography is essential. It's so important for your business. And you can tell, I mean, you were saying before that people don't understand the importance of it, but if you go onto a website to buy something and the images are not professional and the website looks a bit amateur and it doesn't work properly and it doesn't grab your attention, you're not going to buy from them, are you? And it's the same with Instagram. If I go onto someone's Instagram page and all of their photographs are just snapshots from their phone and they have no real meaning, they have no consistency, they don't look professional, you can tell that they're just snapshots on their phone. I don't take the business particularly seriously. And it's the same with everybody. You want to be working with someone who's an expert, who's a professional, who takes their business seriously, who has wanted to invest. And I do understand that brand photography is a big investment, but it is so worth it. You need your business to look good for people who want to buy from you. So I bang on about it a lot, but to me it makes a lot of sense. So
No, absolutely. I think it's important for people to, like, now lockdown specifically or COVID related has really, because a lot of people ask me, how's business, how's things, etc. Right, and I'm like, well, I'm actually busier than I've ever been. Period. Like, I have never been this busy, and the like, then the question comes from that, like, oh, why, right? How? I mean, one, I think it's experience of just knowing how to pivot, or not knowing, but like feeling it, right? Like you talked about instinct earlier. A lot of what business people do, and I'm sure I'm talking to a lot of people who work in business here, a lot of what you do, you can't say why. You can't say, oh, I'm going to do this because this is the, structured reason about why. You just know it's a good idea, or it's a bad idea, right?
6 o'clock in the morning, don't they? It's like, oh, why did I not think of that before?
Yeah. I mean, like, this podcast, for example, is a key example of just an instinct based thing. I launched the podcast back in, well, I started it late last year. I really led into it during lockdown. But it's given me a place to discuss at length about my brand, but also discuss with other business owners like yourself about why their business is important. And also, it's allowed me to build connections with people who otherwise I wouldn't be able to build connections with, that have then end up, in 2 cases, become clients. Because, like, solely because of the podcast. It's not just on their own because of the podcast, but it's also, it allows me to build that trust, build that authority, build that understanding with those people, and for them to also get to know me. Like, we talked about trust a lot in this podcast, but it's also, it's trust based as well, right? Like, it's one of those things where, because you're talking at length with someone, you build a trust with them passively, right? I think for me, the follow-up question was going to be, like, I think there's an obvious merit between what we do and what we both do, right? I don't know how much you want to go into our plans, I'll put it that way, or like what we're planning to do, but I think it's interesting to discuss it a little bit. So, like, I'll let you kind of take the reins on that, because to see, I'm just interested to see kind of how you think it's going to be, and what you think one will do, but also could do.
Yeah, definitely. I think promotional videos are very, very effective ways of getting across a lot of information very quickly, and also getting very into detail about your brand and who you are in a very short space of time. And they can also be very eye-catching and engaging if done correctly, which obviously you're very good at. So I think combined, brand photography and videography could be an amazing package for someone who wants to upscale their business. And so what we're looking at doing together basically is having a brand photography package with a promotional video attached to it. So you work with both of us together, well, not necessarily at the same time, but throughout the package, you go through the branding process and the planning process that you would normally do for a brand photography shoot. And then you go on to work with Carlton about to do your video, and to create a promotional video that way, which then together will be a really, really powerful piece of kit for you to use in your marketing.
Yeah, and I also think it's like a large, for the amount of money that they would spend, it's a very good amount of value in regards to, like, they get two of us, right? So you get two of our heads, one, but also you get a huge amount of assets that you can use for your marketing, for your social media, for your website, for this, for that, etc. So I think for me, the what I wanted, or what I want to achieve with the package and with the kind of, with us working together is firstly for people to understand that stills have their place and also video have their place. They're not, you can't just do one, right? You need to be doing both because they both have different reasons. And to be honest, to be blunt, like, the way to market is to be everywhere. You need to have audio content, you need to have written content, and you need to have video content, and you need to have visual content. So whether that's through video or photos or both, as we've discussed in this podcast, there's thousands of ways how you can utilize imagery, right? Whether that's still imagery or videography imagery. But at the end of the day, if you need to be creating content now because the attention is on social media channels, it is, period. Where your ideal consumer is will change on the channel. But the concept of social media is an afterthought that we need to do as a business. I don't know whether you found this as well, but I found some businesses have said to me, "Oh, social media is an afterthought," because their understanding or their thoughts or their wants is, we're going to advertise our billboards, we're going to advertise our newspaper, we're going to advertise, on the more traditional means, which have their place as well, but you can't neglect social media and you can't neglect doing social media properly, right?
Everybody's on social media.
What would you say to business owners or people who are like, oh, we have a girl who runs our social media, she's the the most savvy member of staff, or etc. What would be your, like, I guess, input there to say why that maybe not exactly, that there is a benefit in having that, just to be clear, but there should be, in my opinion, if you're really going to utilize social media correctly, or you're really going to want it to make you money, which is the point of doing any marketing, you want it to make you money at some point. Why specifically should it be done by an agency, a professional, whether that's run by a professional, but then also having professionals involved in the content creation side of it from your side? What would you say, and how would you what advice would you give to people who are looking to do that, or maybe on the fence about doing that?
What, to work with a professional to do their social media?
Yeah, so whether that's working with an agency or working with content creators who are professionals at their trade, so whether that's with you for brand stuff, for example, or myself for video, or etc., or something along those lines, in that regards, whether you're creating audio or etc., in regards to the content itself. But what kind of advice would you give to those people who are on the fence about using professionals, because they're going to use the term of, oh, well, I already have people running my social media, they're the most savvy member of staff, for example?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would never recommend that someone does all of your social media for you, because I feel very strongly that whoever you are, if you've got your business, it needs to come from you. It needs to be personal to you. So whether it's you sit down with someone and work out your content for a month and you put together a plan, I still think that your copy, I mean, you can get a copywriter to work with you. I know some very good copywriters who will work with you to understand your tone of voice and the way that you speak, which is great because it still comes across as being you. But I think there does definitely need to be an element of you still coming through in your social media. But working with a professional who, well, I mean, I think social media agencies and content creators are very different areas. I honestly don't have very much experience with social media agencies because I've never worked with one myself. I've always done my own social media, so I can't really say a huge amount about that, other than the fact that they know what they're doing, so they will know what to post, when to post, and what messages to post to get the right information across for you. However, with content creators like yourself and me, I just, visually, from my point of view, having images that capture your audience attention is super important, because they're never going to start reading if you can't capture their attention with that image first, or that video. For me, that is super important. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting help with your social media because it does take a lot of time. I definitely wouldn't neglect it altogether. I know people say it's really time consuming, but having brand photography done can really help with that because obviously you get a portfolio of images that you can just pull from whenever you need. So that is one of the big benefits of it. It saves you huge amounts of time. And when we plan your shoot, we obviously go through your social media strategy as well. So hopefully you've got an idea of when, what, and how you're going to post and how you're going to promote things in the future so that it's not too difficult to think about it. So from that point of view, really, really helpful, saves you a lot of time. But if you're struggling for time, I mean, it's obviously a time money situation. Some people can't afford to get other people to do it for them, but putting aside using schedulers is really good for social media because it does save you a lot of time if you can sit down for like an hour and plan a week's worth of social media so that it's going to go out at the right time, say the right thing. It's just done rather than like sitting down and being like, right, I need to post now, and then doing it like 2 days later and sitting down and writing another post. It's done. It's a job that you can do in like an hour. And I don't know about anyone else, but I'm really a bit fussy about how my grid looks on Instagram. So I like to be able to move it all around and make sure that it looks pretty before I send it out. But to me, that helps people to engage with my business and be, visually attracted to my business as well. So that's an important part for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think especially for people who, like, I'm mainly talking photographers and other content creators here, because I know there is a handful that do watch the podcast and do listen to it. It's important, especially if you are a content creator who says, I'm going to make your brand look the bee's knees. Your brand better look the bee's knees times 6 then, because you can't, like I'll give you an example. I can't say I'm a good videographer if I'm not producing video content, right? In the same way, if your photos look like snapshots, I'm not going to hire you, right? If the stuff, it doesn't matter what you take on a shoot. If you're not showing that from a social media perspective, so that stuff that you have taken for clients and you're using it in context to your business, or whether that's actually shots of you doing it, right? So that might be video, that might be photos. It's important because and again, like everything we've discussed in this podcast is about what does someone see. People are very quick at making very fast judgments. There's huge amounts of choice now more than ever, especially as we're all online. It's very easy to change from one profile to another. So something that people need to get and some people need to understand, especially if you're an online selling business or you're a service business or etc., you need to understand why and how you're going to stand out from everyone else, because otherwise you won't. I'll be blunt, you won't. So working with good content creators, people who know what they're doing and take the time to understand who you are and what your business is a sign that you should work with them. If someone's just going to go, right, hand me whatever it is I'm taking photos of, okay, cool, done, maybe not best to work with those people. Because they're not going to take the time and the energy to understand, okay, well, why do you have your brand colours the way you do? Why do you talk the way you do? What do you do? Where did you start? How did you start? Why did you start? Why do you do what you do? Why do you get up every day? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Because all of those things, even if they're minute, they go into the little details. And content creators in general have I can't speak for everyone, but for me specifically, I'm very attention to detail, right? Details are very important because they will mean the world to your audience, right? For example, something like if I use a jewelry example all the time because jewelry is very small, very precise, but there's normally quite a lot of very fine details that make that ring or that necklace or whatever it is very, very special in comparison to something that's not as custom, something that's not been handcrafted. Those, yes, it's not perfect. Yes, there's chips on it. Yes, there might be this, there might be that. But that gives part of the character. That gives part of why in the same way. So like you need to think about your content as something that's going to be tailored to your brand, to your business, to help you articulate to your ideal client, to your ideal audience. And that's why it may seem, because I know the initial thing is like, oh, people see it as like, oh, it's a pain in the ass. I got to go through all these questions. And I got to do all this. I got to do all this like preamble. I just want a photo shoot. I just want to get some photos done. And the people who say that, I would say, think about why we're asking you all these questions. Why why are we going through all the time and energy to make sure that we understand your business and brand first, right? I think it's really important. So, I mean, that's just my thoughts on that. What kind of like what would you say to people who are like, well, it takes so much time, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy to get brand stuff done properly?
Yeah, but it's so difficult to get images of yourself, and this is the issue I have. As you said, that like who's going to take my brand pictures, and I've had a brand shoot done. I mean, it's a while ago now, and I do need to get it updated. But like, on a shoot the other day, my client's son was there, and I said to him, "Do you fancy having a go at taking a picture?" So I gave him one of my cameras, taught him how I set it up, like all the settings correctly and everything, and taught him how to focus and zoom and things, and he loved it. But it meant that I had a couple of pictures, and actually he did a really good job of me working behind the scenes, which I very rarely get, because usually I do work one-on-one with my clients, and it's very unusual that I get anyone that I'm like, "Oh, by the way, can you just take a picture of me taking a picture?" But it's really difficult. But again, it's the same with everybody. To capture images of yourself working is really difficult. Yeah, you can take a selfie. Anyone can take a selfie, but it doesn't say very much. To have a photograph of you doing your work, especially if you make things, or if you're like taking photos or videography, doing videography, or I don't know, just things with your hands, taking photographs of you behind the scenes doing what you do. You can't really do that yourself. It's difficult to do properly and correctly to get a good result. And even if you are a service-based business where you work with clients, having photographs of you in a consultation or working with your clients is going to give your other clients an insight into how you work and your personality, and the processes that you go through. And you can't do that yourself. It's not really possible. You can't be like, "Oh, by the way, can we just stop our consultation? I'm just going to grab my phone and take a selfie." It's not natural. It's not like it's not going to look right at all. So those images are the ones that you get in a brand photo shoot, and they can really speak volumes. Uh, it's so difficult to capture yourself on camera, but sometimes those images are the most powerful because it really allows your customers to get to know you better.
No, absolutely. I think it's really important, and I'm aware of time, but I think for me it's important for people to use this time if they are shut and they are thinking, okay, well, where do I want to go with business? How do I want to go? How are you marketing? How are you talking to your customers? How are you talking to your clients? Could you be doing more? Should you be doing more? If so, do you know the answer to those questions? If you don't, that's fine. Have a conversation with someone like me, someone like Susie. It doesn't matter who it is. Have a conversation with someone who does it for a living, because they're going to know how to come across through content better than you are, right? Unfortunately, that's the reality, right? Because you're an expert in your field, but you won't be an expert in content creation necessarily. You'll have ideas, you'll have things, but I think for me, to get the real magic out of the content and to get the real, at the end of the day, return on investment from the content, you need someone who's able to massage the content or craft the content or, tweak the content specifically to, allow you to come across correctly, allow you to have the right messages, allow you to be seen in the right light, whether that's figuratively or legitimately in the right light, but just in regards to lighting. But I think it's important, and that's why I wanted to bring you on, because I think a lot of value can be had from this conversation about why branding is important, period. I think that's the kind of takeaway here is, what is your brand? If you have a brand, why is it important, right? And if you don't necessarily, should you be? Are you doing a product or service? You have an idea of a product or service, but you don't necessarily have a very strong brand or a brand behind it. Now is the time to create that brand. Now is the time to understand what that brand actually means to you, what the values are, and why they're important to your customer. And then at the end of the day, why your product or service is also valuable to your customer. And when you understand that, it makes marketing it very, very easy. Because you know all the answers to the answers to the questions. You know those answers. For people, sorry, go on.
Sorry, it's understanding the difference between branding and brand identity as well, because you actually don't have any control over you. Well, you do have control over it, but your brand is basically what your clients think of you. It's what people say about you, and you can't really do anything to change it apart from changing your brand identity. And this is something that people don't understand, and it's something that is quite unknown, and people talk about their brand but don't really know what they're talking about. And actually your brand is something that you can't physically change. You can change. Branding is the work that you put into building your brand identity, and your brand identity is the thing that you can change. That is, your visuals, your tone of voice, your messages, your photos, your videos, etc. That is all of your brand identity, and together building up that creates your brand, which is the impression that your customers get from you. So now is the time that you really, really need to be in front of your customers, and do it any way that you possibly can, whether it's social media. Email marketing is so important, guys. If you don't do it. You need to build up an email list. You need to be in front of your clients and messaging them regularly, because Facebook and Instagram could crash any day. And what would happen if that happened? Do you have a list of clients do you have an email list that belongs to you? Because that's not going to go anywhere. It's really, really important. And to have images that you can use throughout all of your content. So whether that's your social media, your website, your email marketing, your blog, your videography, anything, you want to have your images that represent you. And if you use the same ones again and again, people are going to recognize you and think back to, oh yeah, I remember seeing that. It's a bit like a signature, really.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think there is a level though where you do need to refresh them, in regards to, you can't just regurgitate the same image over and over and over again, because people will also be like, yeah, well, I've seen this, I'm going to keep scrolling, right? Like, that's why having consistent, unique content going out is important. So for those, firstly, do you have any ending thoughts, ending questions, anything that you want to mention specifically that we haven't necessarily covered?
I don't think so. I think I'm good.
Okay, cool, fab. I mean, for people who maybe is in hiring you for a shoot, having a conversation about what that looks like, having a conversation maybe about just to talk about what you do more, whether that's an advice standpoint, whether another photographer, or whether it's another brand photographer looking to get a brand shoot done, because as we've discussed, there is a marry there, so there is room for everyone. Where can people find you?
Well, obviously on social media, as we talked so much about it. I'm on social media as Suzy Ellis Brand Photography. My website is susyeellisphotography.co.uk. So I'm on all of those. But actually, a question just quickly would be,
of course,
if you would mind telling people how you found your brand shoot. How did you find the process?
I mean, for me, it was interesting because I haven't had a brand shoot, so to speak. I've had shoots, right? Not one that was, I'll use the term specifically tailored towards brand specifically. For me, as I'm on content a lot, for me, it's kind of, when I first did them at the start of the year, I was like, I don't feel comfortable doing this, like everyone, right? But I've probably done 6, 7, 8 photo shoots now, for me, in one way or another. So whether that's mini ones, or and also it kind of has that memory where I'm already vlogging myself, already creating content around myself, so I'm kind of already aware of being in front of the camera. I mean, for me, it was interesting as we've said privately, sort of seeing what your spin was going to be, right? I didn't go into it with a conceived, right, this is what I expect it to be. I mean, for me, it was great. I mean, it was very kind of, in some ways, hands off, but also not, if that makes sense. It's very hard for me to describe that, because that is a contradictory in terms, right? Because how could it be hands off but also hands on? It's this kind of at times you are hands on when you need to be, but at times you're not. That makes sense? It's okay, cool, I have some ideas in my head. Here's my ideas. Okay, cool, we can do those, but also, have you thought about doing these? Okay, no, I haven't. Let's do those as well, right? And it's about kind of, I think, with every client shoot, it's as it also evolves during the shoot as well. Because there's stuff that we said oh, we think this is going to work. Then we go to actually try and create it, and it's well, actually, no, that doesn't work. But there's another idea that might work. So then we explore that idea. I mean, for me, as I said to you early on, it's something that I will always want to have happen, and always will do semi-regularly, because of what I do, right? As we've discussed quite a lot in this podcast, there is a lot of point and it's hypocritical of me to say you should be investing in content, you should be creating content if I'm not also investing in creating content myself, right? In the same way, it would be hypocritical of you to say that as well. So that's why it's important to have one. But also in regards to our shoot specifically, it was very interesting because I haven't done one of those in Salisbury. Firstly, all the ones I've done before have been in London or on jobs or etc. And it kind of was like in my head, I was like, why am I not doing this in Salisbury when I'm a Salisbury videographer? So that was that. So there was definite like, right, I need to do this in Salisbury. From just a COVID standpoint, I kind of needed to do it in Salisbury as well because, I'm trying to limit where I go and what I do for obvious reasons. But yeah, I mean, there is no like catch-all answer to how was your shoot, right? It's like, how was your day? Well, it was shit sometimes, it was great others. It's like it's very different. I think for me, I'll look back on those images as another way to immortalize where I was at that time, right? And I think that's and with everything else that I was doing at the time, and I am gonna be doing like probably a larger video because I did take some footage of that shoot, as you know, talking about why that shoot was important and why that shoot is important. And I just haven't got around to actually scripting and filming that content yet. But it is something that I'm planning to do. So, but also I think it's going to be, as I said, something that will be interesting because I'm sure there will be a time in the next couple of months where I'll need more or I want more and we'll do a different style shoot. Specifically, I've already got ideas on what that will be. So putting those images side by side, I think it's going to be very interesting to say, well, okay, well, this was the first one that we did. This is what the target was there. Okay, well, what's the target? What was the target here? How has it changed? Where are the differences? So I think the question or the point there is, yes, you should get it done, but you should then also work out how you're going to get it done again within the next couple of months after that, because as we've discussed throughout this podcast, it's very important to have brand new curated content going out in content that's relevant to your brand and your business.
Yeah, I think it depends on your business as well, though. I mean, some people post more often than others, and that's fine. Being consistent is the most important thing. So if you only want to post on social media a couple of times a week, that's fine, but just make sure that you do it a couple of times a week. And obviously, if you're only doing that, then your brand photography images will probably last you a bit longer. You do need to plan a bit further ahead so that you know what's going to happen in the future. But yeah, you're right. Updated content is always really important. So I do tend to tell people, once you've had your shoot, don't stop there. You need to look into the future and you keep going with it. You can't just have one shoot and that last you forever, because especially now, people need photographs with masks and PPE and everything and included. And hopefully in a few months we won't need that anymore. So everything's going to go back to more normality, and the images will change again, or then may bring in new restrictions and new rules that we have to abide by, and you need new images of that. So it's all changed. Everything changes all the time.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't necessarily, and I think this will be the ending point here for me anyway, like, it's not always necessarily about COVID. COVID is the hot topic right now and the hot thing that's changing everything in the world. But even before, there was stuff that changed that was like news relevant or business relevant or industry relevant or not, right? Like, also just things like, for example, if you're a videographer, if you were shooting on a GH5 and you're now shooting on a cinema camera, yeah, you should probably update your images to prove that you're shooting on a cinema camera, for example. But also to show that you can also shoot on mirrorless or etc. as well. There's always going to be ways to change up your imagery, change up how you're doing it, changing up why, and also to not get comfortable, I think, is the key thing. Is not get comfortable in going, oh yeah, that's done, oh yeah, that's done, oh yeah, that's done. Always be adaptive, always try and push those boundaries. For me, where I've seen the most business growth has simply been from that push for, well, yeah, this is good now, but why is it, what else can we do better? How can we make this video better? How can we make this content better? How can we make this plan better? How can we make this pre-production better, etc.? And how can I get better as well? Because in that process, you become better at your job. You become better at whatever you do as well.
Yeah, all very true. Yeah.
So cool. I think we'll wrap it off there. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for enjoying. And I hope it was enjoyable. And yeah, so yeah. Well, I'll talk very soon. And I'm sure there'll be other stuff that we will do. Well, there is other stuff. There is. What am I saying? There is going to be.
After that, I don't want to work with you anymore.
I said we're done. They're done. I went on your podcast. But yeah, no. Thanks so much for coming on. I'll see you very, very soon. Thank you ever so much for joining me once again, ladies and gents. I did hope you enjoyed that insight on branding photography, branding overall, and also just general content curation. For those of you who may not have known, or if you're a starting photographer, maybe you may want to do some branding photography. It is a very interesting market to be a part of. But thank you so much, Susie, for coming on and listening or talking to me about brand photography. And yeah, I will see you next week for a brand new episode with possibly, not sure which order they're going to go out in yet, but possibly a social media consultant. We're going to talk about everything about social media and why it's important in the world of COVID-19 and how it's affecting this year and will be affecting next year as well. But yeah, thank you so much for coming back. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave it with a like, and I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you very, very soon.